to always, when he talked with white people, to make sure the better end of it was for his own black people. He was called Negro Abraham, and he escaped from slavery from a family, I think Dr. Sierra family, and he escaped to the Native Americans we call Seminoles. He could speak their language. It was probably Muskogee Creek that he learned to speak. He could have learned how to speak Miccosukee or Hitchiti, but he was very famous in negotiating with white people on the behalf of the Seminole Indians and their black allies.
I have a question. The descendants of the Seminoles, what are they doing in Florida? What is their position in Florida today, those descendants?
The descendants in Florida, there's a few people know their heritage. Even today, the Seminole tribe of Florida got 5 or 6 reservations here. And the one that's predominantly black is the reservation in a place called Fort Pierce. Like I said earlier, this history about the blacks and their participation in the Seminole Wars, really, if you're not a history major, anthropology, or archaeology professor, attaining to be a professor, sometime in your educational process, you don't even come in contact with it. There's a lot of black people got Native American blood, but white people set up a stereotype that you got to look like a Native American. You got to have high cheekbones, you got to have the broad hook nose, and you got to have straight hair. That don't always work. Coffee washes out milk a lot of times, but it's still coffee. And what I'm saying, I've been on the reservation with little light-skinned boys who look Indian. Their hair was in a big afro and just as naughty as any other black person. I've seen the little black one, dark-skinned one, have hair all the way down the shoulder. So which one look like an Indian? It's whatever people set up what the Indian's supposed to look like. All the Indians don't look alike. The Seminoles don't look like Apaches. The Seminoles don't look like Mohawks. As sure as all Indians don't look alike, all black people don't look alike. So this stereotypical thing about having the thin lips and all of this, that's a bunch of crap. Okay?
You don't know. Don't tell me Negro, that's nothing. What were you before the white man named you a Negro? And where were you? And what did you have? What was yours? What language did you speak then? What was your name? It couldn't have been Smith or Jones or Bunch or Powell. That wasn't your name. They don't have those kind of names where you and I came from. No, what was your name? And why don't you now know what your name was then? Where did it go? Where did you lose it? Who took it? And how did he take it? What tongue did you speak? How did the man take your tongue? Where is your history? How did the man wipe out your history? What did the man do to make you as dumb as you are right now?
This momentous decree came as a great beacon light of hope to millions of Negro slaves who had been seared in the flames of withering injustice. It came as a joyous daybreak to end the long night of their captivity. But 100 years later, the Negro still is not free. 100 years later, the life of the Negro is still sadly crippled by the manacles of segregation and the chains of discrimination. 100 years later, the Negro lives on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. 100 years later, the Negro is still languished in the corners of American society and finds himself in exile in his own land. And so we've come here today to dramatize a shameful condition. In a sense, we've come to our nation's capital to cash a check. When the architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they were signing a promissory note to which every American was to fall heir. This note was a promise that all men, yes, black men as well as white men, would be guaranteed the unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
In the late 1800s, there was something called the Dawes Rolls, which was basically a census that made records of people's ethnic backgrounds in order to determine which Native American tribes would get certain land allotments and other benefits. After slavery, many black people were associated with some of these tribes by bloodline, through marriage, through adoption, and even servitude. And because they were associated with these tribes, many black people were entitled to some of these benefits. The government did not want blacks to get these benefits, so they created a separate freedmen's list specifically for black people. They also started to list any full-blooded Native American who had African features as black because they didn't want them getting those benefits either. At the same time, they allowed white citizens to come in and pay money under the table to be listed as part Native American.
1895 and 1896, when a lot of the whites found out the benefits that these blacks are going to be entitled to, a lot of whites went to the Dawes Commission and say, look, why don't you put my name on there? They said, but you're not an Indian. So that's what they said, well, I'll give you $5. So the rule got around, the policy got around that for $5 that a white could put his name on the Dawes rolls and be called himself an Indian and be entitled to all these benefits, and all their children could be entitled to all these benefits forever. And so that became known as what's called a $5 Indian. And so if you go around now and check most of the Indians, the so-called Indians in America, about 90% of them are not even Indians. Those are just whites now who are passing as Indians. But they're getting all the benefits. And they're not paying any taxes, getting free college education. They put up a little reservation on the land that they don't live on. They have another home off and get all kind of benefits.
Iron Eyes Cody was another famous Native American person. He was in the media for years. In the 1970s, they utilized him for this pollution commercial. He was known as the Crying Indian. So he was a very well-known Native American in American culture. But the reality is, Iron Eyes Cody wasn't Native American at all. He was Sicilian. Both of his parents were from Sicily. So he didn't have one drop of Native American blood in him. He was another fake Indian.
Is this you discussing Indian blood? We're going to judge people by whether they have Indian blood, whether they're qualified to run a gaming casino or not?
That probably is me, absolutely. Because I'll tell you what, if you look at some of the reservations that you've approved, you, sir, in your great wisdom have approved, I will tell you right now, they don't look like Indians to me, and they don't look like the Indians. Now, maybe we say politically correct or not politically correct. They don't look like Indians to me, and they don't look like Indians to Indians, and a lot of people are laughing at it, and you're telling how tough it is, how rough it is to get approved. Well, you go up to Connecticut, and you look. Now, they don't look like Indians to me, sir.
Similarities.
The other thing is, I'd like to know how many of these people are even Indians to begin with, because I've looked at them, and I have to tell you something, they don't look like Indians to me. And I've told a couple of them who came into my office, I said, I believe I have more Indian blood in my veins than you have, and I have none. And they laugh. They think it's a joke.
Okay, so flash forward now to
when I went up the mountain, the Creator didn't ask me if I was Indian. Didn't ask me if I was white. It heard my call, and it answered my call.
When I first heard some of the Native American teachings, I remember weeping, talking about all things being connected, as I understand it, and that what you take, you must give back.
There's a lot of people out there getting involved, interested in shamanism, curious about shamanism, and so the idea was to provide some sort of base for the white culture.
I can treat my products with respect. I can know who the artist is, but if someone buys it that doesn't want to use it respectfully, that's not my responsibility.
I'm called to do speaking engagements all over the country on this wisdom, so as the person becomes more popular, they can't really do what they want. This is really my love, to be here with these Native American people.
And the Church of Loving Hands is a church of natural healing in medicine ways. And our primary tenet is to facilitate individual spiritual expression in all daily activities of life.
You can always tell a white person when they give the Indian name. It's always these Hollywood type of names, you know, Rolling Thunder or Swift Deer or yeah, you can always tell that kind of stuff, and they're always English names, so to speak. I think that's ridiculous because they don't know the reason why they have names. They don't have naming ceremonies.
The name come to me when I was writing something about my grandmother. And I kept thinking about other names, other things, and everything. And this little voice said, nope, you are a Windfeather.
Those people, Brooke Medicine Eagle, Jim Silver Eagle, why don't they pick up a name like Bloody Guts? Something, you know, that doesn't have that ring of power and spirituality.
My name is Skyhawk Oyella. My Anglo-Saxon name is Rosalind, and I'm a Métis medicine woman of Blackfoot and Ojibwa heritage.
I got my name on my vision quest, and I felt firm. This is my name. I knew I heard it. It felt right. It resonated in my being. And
no one can take that from me. People can mock it if they want. People can, do whatever they wish with it. But I feel it in my being, and that describes who I am.
But the Indian name comes from a very honored place and a very special, like a family carrying on its tradition through its name, Those are treated with great respect and honor. We don't just pluck names out of somewhere,
Great Spirit, hear our hearts. Let our voices express our joy and our connectedness here as one people at one fire. Ho!
I was an Indian in a previous life. Well, you're white now. Yeah, these guys in the previous life, they always were kings or queens. Where I used to be the Duchess of Earl when I was... I never met a guy... I worked at Standard Oil when I was in previous life. I swept up the toilet. It's always this kind of stuff.
A medicine man could be viewed by his own tribe as one of the most powerful sources of inspiration, revelation, and healing. But the assumption would be if he was wearing a three-piece suit and carrying a briefcase, he probably would be dismissed by the outsiders. This is not the case within the tribe. Within the tribe, material goods often do not play a part in how we assess and treat each other and hold each other in respect. So the case of the plastic shaman, if you may, then is very close to the pretend Indian. Both operate off a list of symbols, and they are more concerned with the arrangement of these symbols and the display of these symbols than they are with the content and context behind these symbols.
People keep thinking that what we do is Indian spirituality. Certainly the circle and the drum is a common human heritage, and yet somehow people see that as being Indian. And so I think that's a lot of what we're getting from the Center for the Spirit and J.C. Eaglesmith and other people that attack us who don't really know what we do. They haven't really experienced it.
The heart of it is 3 days and nights fasting, and we do use the medicine wheel as a metaphor, but other than that, I have to tell you honestly, I don't know how Native Americans do lead Vision Quest other than stories I've heard. I haven't experienced it.
Male and female. These twin flames represent the balance that we all seek within ourselves and without. May this be brought in with us tonight.
What this replication of Indians' ceremony points out to me are two things. Number one, there's a spiritual vacuum that this society that we live in, it creates people that are looking for something that's real. And secondly, and sadly, sometimes they get Native Americans involved in teaching them these things. But that points out the poverty and lack of opportunity on Indian land. People are so frustrated and desperate that they'll do anything for money.
In Florida, a group claiming to be a Cherokee Nation participates in a dance. In Alabama, people who call themselves a Cherokee tribe march in a parade. In Texas, a group who have declared themselves a Cherokee Nation performs a ceremony. What these three groups have in common is that none are federally recognized. They are fraudulent Cherokee tribes, and they are just a few among many. In the last 30 years, many groups have emerged claiming to be an authentic Cherokee nation, band, or tribe. Although some of their members may have Cherokee ancestors, these groups are associations and are not legitimate tribal governments. Almost all of these groups misrepresent Cherokee culture. Some sell spiritual advice, non-Indian art, and non-Cherokee crafts. A few have tried to open casinos. Several groups have interfered with federal and state laws. Their claims of authenticity has led to confusion among the general public. Organizations and schools have been deceived. Government officials do not know if these groups represent real Cherokees. The number of these fake Cherokee tribes has been growing and now has reached over 200. Today, there are only 3 authentic federally recognized Cherokee tribes: the Cherokee Nation, the United Kituwa Band of Cherokee Indians in Oklahoma, and the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians. For 500 years, the Cherokee people have faced overwhelming adversity, and it has been their tribal governments that fought the battles to retain and secure Cherokee rights and privileges. For many people today, it is becoming unclear who represents and governs Cherokees.
Well, a tribe is a governmental entity that has an established, recognized government-to-government relationship with the federal government.
Our relationship with the federal government is long, it's continuous, it's historically documented.
There's only 3 Cherokee tribes in the United States, 2 in Oklahoma, 1 in North Carolina. That's it.
The other tribes that have petitioned over the many years for federal recognition just haven't been able to meet the criteria.
Some groups claim to be federally recognized, but they are not, and their evidence is misleading. A form letter from the President of the United States, a mention in the Federal Register, correspondence from a federal agency. A few fake tribes claim authenticity from being recognized by states, but as laid out in the U.S. Constitution, only Congress has the right to recognize tribal governments. States have no standard set of requirements. Some states simply grant recognition by a legislative resolution or a letter from the governor. Membership standards for these fake tribes are often minimal. Many require nothing more than the belief one is Cherokee. Fake tribes imitate authentic Indian tribes. Almost every group uses the title of principal chief or chief as their head. Several groups make up tribal roles that are not part of Cherokee culture. Members very often create Indian names for themselves. The majority of these names have no connection to Cherokee tradition. At times, the names are romanticized and stereotypical. Fraudulent tribes often state their intention is to learn and spread traditional Cherokee culture. Here, a chief makes a presentation. He is wearing a war bonnet. Cherokees never wore them. A teepee. Cherokees never lived in them. A man claiming to be a firekeeper in a costume of his own creation. A radical misinterpretation of a Booker dance. On their websites, these groups express their versions of Cherokee history and culture. Very few of them represent it accurately.
These frauds are harmful in the fact that they distort our history, they distort our culture, they misrepresent who we are by putting on these particular shows of trying to be Indian.
I'm proud to be a Cherokee, and I was raised Cherokee, and for them to misidentify themselves by mocking my ancestors is just wrong, and it's heartbreaking.
Many of these fraudulent groups use deceptive practices to take advantage of the rights and privileges reserved for real tribal governments. One group sold counterfeited automobile license plates. Another group, claiming sovereignty, deceived a local sheriff with a fake court order and took custody of a child. The case was exposed, and the child was returned to its parents. Several have tried to open illegal casinos. Another fraudulent tribe sold tribal memberships to illegal immigrants. They sold 10,000 membership cards for anywhere from $50 to $1,400. One fake tribe illegally channeled money from a government grant to schools for each student enrolled in their fake tribe. They charged $120 for memberships, and no proof of Indian ancestry was required.
We have people out there who are scamming other people for thousands and thousands of dollars.
But what really concerns me about groups that aren't legitimate is the damage they can cause, not only in outside parties and governments listening to them in terms of making federal policy, state policy, local policy, but also interfering in people's lives.
To me, they're stealing our history, our culture, and that rightly belongs to the Cherokee people.
I don't feel that it's right. I don't think that people should just go around just making up their own tribes, calling them whatever they want to call themselves. To be a Cherokee, you have to be a citizen, you have to be by blood. Anybody can start a club up, and it's only if you want to join it, you'll join it. But I was born into this. I can't change it.
You don't have to be a citizen to learn about our tribe, and we welcome you with open arms. If there's a difference between citizenship and heritage, and the citizenship issue is what we're talking about here today.
Today, the governments of the 3 Cherokee tribes are contributing to the endurance of the Cherokee people. In their jurisdictional boundaries of Oklahoma and North Carolina, the Cherokee language and culture still thrive. The largest of the 3, the Cherokee Nation, with over 280,000 citizens, operates 8 health centers, numerous housing and language programs, as well as career, community, and human services. The Cherokee Nation has helped to improve the quality of life for all people in Northeast Oklahoma. They employ more than 6,800 people and financially contribute to local fire and police departments, road development, and Oklahoma public schools. Heritage is different from citizenship. For those people with Cherokee ancestors who cannot become citizens, the Cherokee Nation encourages them to embrace their heritage by learning more about Cherokee history, language, and culture. For more information, call the Cherokee Nation or visit the website www.cherokee.org. By supporting authentic Cherokee culture and tribal governments, one can help all Cherokees. The Cherokee people have endured for hundreds of years, and they plan to endure for hundreds of years into the future.
Look at this. Somebody come look at this.
What do you think, audience? What do you think?
Hold up, look. I gotta get it out. Hold up. What the fuck is that, man?